Welcome to this edition of the High Strangeness Factor, copyrighted on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I'm your host, Steve Ward. One of the reoccurring themes on the show is that of high strangeness areas, portals, vortices, or as John Keel called them, window areas. We've been doing a series of shows that have dealt with and will deal with one of these locations that lay in southern Wisconsin, among other related topics. And first, I want to introduce my co-host tonight, Andy Mercer. Great to have you back.
Yes, it's good to be back on again. It's hopefully get a bit more frequent now than it used to be. Hopefully that's going to continue to be the case. Had a bit of a minor emergency today, as you know. My microphone started not to work for a while, but I've got it working, hopefully. So
well, people that have real jobs. I mean, real jobs just get in the way of this fun stuff, you know.
Oh, I know. Tell me about it. It's really annoying.
And Brandi, we're getting to just getting to be a habit now, which has been a lot of fun. And what I want to say is that you and I are doing kind of a series of shows that have dealt with and will deal with the Bray Road area, one of these high strangeness areas that Linda Godfrey really started writing about with The Beast of Bray Road and with that first book about these upright canids. But there's so much else going on. And so we've been talking about that sometimes exclusively. Sometimes it'll just be one aspect of the show. But our guest tonight is going to be somebody that can really tell us a lot about her experiences and about this area. But first, Andy, please tell us about your new YouTube channel.
Oh, yes. I think I attached it to the last show at the end, just mentioning I've got this finally up and running. It's been something I've been planning probably for a year or more, thinking about. In fact, the first inklings of the idea was a couple of years ago, but I've finally launched it. Basically, it's a short YouTube videos where I analyze ghost video footage from around the world, from various social media platforms, YouTube, obviously, and things like Twitter and Instagram and all that. There are a few channels that do this kind of thing. They compile short collections of the best ghost videos on YouTube, that sort of thing. But I try to go in a little bit more detail. I try to offer a bit of analysis. I don't say whether I think they're real or not. That's very much for the audience to decide, but it's just to give you a chance to look at some of the things that perhaps sometimes even the original uploader might have missed themselves. I finally put the very first one up on Halloween, which I thought was the appropriate time to start. It's gone pretty well, actually. I had quite a few views. I've got quite a few new subscribers. So it's called The Cryptic Files, and if anyone searches YouTube for The Cryptic Files, you'll find it. The next one will be going up probably on Saturday. In fact, I had a little poll on my Facebook page whether I should put them on Fridays or Saturdays, and Saturdays is winning. So the chances are this Saturday coming, there will be another one. And the idea is to put one up one a week, certainly for the time being, perhaps more frequently if I can build the channel a bit further. I've got quite a few already pre-made, so there's a nice stock of them in the background ready to rock and roll as soon as I can. So yeah, it's I'd say it's not all to do for a long time, and so far so good. People seem to like what I've done so far.
Now, the upcoming one is going to be Mark Johnson's?
Oh, no, that'll be a little bit later on. I do have a clip from our glorious leader, Mark Johnson, who sent over a few, and one in particular really caught my eye. So I'm going to be working on it for a little while, but it will be included in one of the uploads at some point in the near future. But no, the next one's coming up actually involves an investigation that I was on. So there's a bit of one there for it's been on another channel before because we sent it in to the guy who runs one of the sort of channels, a guy called Sir Spooks. He put it up, but mine's a little bit long with a bit more detail because, as I say, I was actually there. So that's in this week's, and another one from a very interesting clip from an English ghost investigation team that seemed to have captured something in a person's house. I won't say much more about it because hopefully people will watch it, but it is really intriguing what they seem to have captured. And I say, if they've not, I don't think they've faked it. I don't think they're the kind of people who would fake it. So if it's genuine, it's pretty good. So we shall see.
And of course, Mark is one of our fearless leaders here at the network, so that'll be interesting. But Brandi and I have seen your first video, and you go through it, you narrate it, you point out things that both the people in the video have seen, but stuff that you notice yourself. But you're right, you don't make any pronouncements about what is real or not. You let the viewer decide that.
Very much so. And I invite people to comment in the comment section as to whether they think it's real or not. I mean, I won't agree or disagree with any opinions put forward by people. It's just their own opinions. But yeah, I mean, I want people to say what they think and let me know. So also, if anyone has any clips that they know of or they've got themselves that they think would be interesting, please let me know. So you can message me on the Cryptic Files. Just leave something actually on the page. I'm working on a Twitter and Instagram account for it, but they're not set up just yet. But I also set up an email address, which I've got, but for some reason I can't remember the password. When I first set it up some time ago. So
that never happens to me.
Oh, it's so annoying. I've tried everything I could think to actually get it back, and I can't get it. So I'm gonna have to set up a new account. But the idea will be that people, if they've got stuff they think it's worth me using, let me know. Obviously, I can't guarantee I'll use everybody's clips. I mean, one thing I don't want is anything to do with orbs and that sort of stuff. I mean, it's a controversial topic, but most kind of think, man, maybe they aren't real. So I'm going to avoid those. But anything that looks particularly strange, I mean, it's predominantly ghosts, but I've got some more what you might call possibly UFO type of footage as well. So I'm open to anything that looks a bit strange and mysterious. But ghosts seem to be the popular thing, so that's why it's on the main thing I've been working with.
I'm beginning to think I should just use the simplest password possible and use it for everything and just take a chance.
That's the thing, of course. If we figure out it for one thing, it's the same for everything, you're in trouble.
That's true. That's true. Okay. Well, let me introduce our guest for today. After learning that the beast of Bray Road and other cryptids were right in her own backyard in southern Wisconsin, Donna Fink went on the hunt. That was in 2011. And she's still out in the woods and fields experiencing the unimaginable. In her adventures, she has run across Dogmen, Bigfoot, UFOs, orbs, Gremlins, and even a Wereboy. Having interviewed and talked with many eyewitnesses of cryptids and UFOs, she knows to expect the unexpected. Donna can be found on her YouTube channel interviewing eyewitnesses and researching locations of sightings. She has two paranormal groups, Beast of Bray Road and Southern Wisconsin's Wild Ones, Ohio, Michigan, Illinois, and recently hosted the first ever Beast of Bray Road Conference 2021 in Elkhorn, Wisconsin. Donna is also writing a book on her paranormal adventures. Donna, welcome to the High Strangeness Factor.
Thank you, Steve.
First, I want to talk a little bit about I went to your conference and was privileged to speak there, and I had Brandi was with me also at my table. I looked like a real professional with a helper at my table, and it was really a good time. I mean, Brandi and I just had a blast, and a lot of interesting people to talk to, a lot of interesting speakers. But I have to ask you, how early did you decide to try to create this conference?
It was probably May of 2021 when I decided that it's time somebody celebrates the beast. He's so famous worldwide, and I have people contacting me from France and Ireland and all over the world about the Dogman and the Beast of Bray Road. And I thought, well, if I don't do it, I don't think anybody else is ever going to. So I decided to have a conference, and it turned out really well, and it was so great to meet everyone.
Well, I know we had somebody there from Texas. There was somebody there that flew in from Maine. So, yes. That was, and plus I'm sure there was some locals, but, and it's not too bad. It wasn't too bad of a drive for Brandi. I know for me, it's not that bad. You have to get around Chicago. That's always a chore.
Yes.
But yeah, it was nice to have something, if not quite in my backyard, almost in my backyard. So, and it must have been gratifying. I mean, it was a successful conference, and not all first conferences are successful. So how did you feel about that?
Well, I know it could have gone better, and I think it will each year that I have it. And I know there's things I could have done differently and better. But my hope was just that we get to celebrate the beast, and people that are interested in him get to be able to get together and talk to other people. And I think they had a good chance to do that in between the speakers, and especially because sometimes the flash drives weren't working real well. And
yeah.
They all got a little more time to shop at the vendor tables and to talk to people like yourself. I thought that was really great.
Well, I thought it was a very successful conference, especially for a first conference. So I would have been pleased as punch if I had run it. I would have felt really good about it.
Oh, thank you. I tried.
Yeah, well, you did, and it was very successful. And you couldn't really have fit too many more people in the conference area.
Oh,
So
I'm
it
trying
was
to have
it
it
was
in a
good.
bigger place next year.
Well, that'll be good because I really think it will grow. Um, yeah, I can't imagine me doing one of those. I would I'd be all gray hair, all white hair, which is
Well,
I got
it was hard because every speaker that I had booked early on, every single one of them canceled on me. And
oh,
then I saw that you were coming, but I didn't know who you were until somebody else, maybe it was Jody Cook or someone.
I think it was Brian Seach.
Oh, Brian. Yeah, I love
Yes, yes.
Brian. Yes. It was Brian. And I thought, well, if Steve's going to be here anyway, I would love to have him as a speaker. And I had no idea the depth of your knowledge. And I was just so happy to have you and
Well,
everybody that I ended up with.
well, yeah, it was. We had a nice group, and I really appreciated being there. So let's start out and find out a little bit about you. Are you somebody that is a sensitive? I mean, do you pick
No,
up on the? Okay,
no.
you and I are in the same canoe, then, buddy. Let me tell you.
Oh, I'm as dumb as a box of rocks.
All right.
You have to hit me in the head, and then I go, oh, maybe that's something. Yeah.
I've had one weird experience, which I won't bore people with again, but that's about it, you know. Uh, so when you were a kid, you weren't seeing dead people or getting
No,
weird cosmic vibrations.
no.
So so what led you? We all had our paths, and there's people that are experiencers that want to seek out what this stuff is. There's people like you and me that came into it other ways. So how did you come into this interest?
Well, I had seen Bob Gimlin and Roger Patterson's film, when I was young. And I put that in the back of my mind and I thought, well, why can't that be real? Why is everyone having such a fit about it not being real? And it looks real to me, but I put that aside and lived my life until the early 90s. And on one of the television programs was Linda Godfrey talking about the Beast of Bray Road. But my kids were younger then, and I didn't have and I was working and I didn't have the time to go out in the field, and I didn't have anyone to go with, and I wasn't going to go by myself. So it wasn't until 2011 I had read in her books of a sighting that's near my home, and I figured out exactly where I think it crossed the road. And I started there at the neighbor's house, and sure enough, she had had a sighting. And her son took us into the woods next door, and there was a huge shelter, and it's been nonstop. It's been nonstop since then.
Let's paint a picture for people that may not know the area at all. Where would we say Elkhorn is? It's in southern Wisconsin, obviously, but what other landmarks would you give somebody that doesn't know where to find
It's
it?
in Walworth County, which is southeast in Wisconsin, and it's very south. We're probably maybe a half hour from the border with Illinois. And then it's very far east. It's further east than Rock County where I live, but it's only about a half an hour from my home. So we also would go out to Bray Road, but you can't really stop there because the police will come and get you
Yes.
away. Yeah. Did you notice that?
Well, Brandi and I took a stroll, a nonchalant stroll down Bray Road, and we knew that I have been there once a couple times before, but I parked about a half mile away at a shopping center that was signs up that says that we will tow your car if we don't like you. So so it was like a half mile to get to the road, and then the first time I did it, I still had my winter legs. I hadn't been out that much, so it was my first long spring jaunt. And man, that night my legs were under severe stress, I guess, but
Well,
not
right,
so bad this time.
park there, and because the police will come and have you move.
Yes.
And so you've got to park somewhere in a parking lot and then walk a distance.
Well, Brandy and I won't say where we parked, but we got
Okay.
permission to park on private property.
Oh, yes.
And so, but we had to walk, and I'm sure you know where I mean. So we had to walk down a particular road. What do you think, Brandy? A half mile to get to
It could have been. Yeah, it could have been.
Route 11. I want to make it sound as long as possible to make
Yeah.
people think I'm, resilient. But and then a short jaunt on I think Route 11, and then we were there at Bray Road, and we were there on the I guess you'd call it the east side, where the weird stuff happens. And so, and let's tell people, Bray Road. When the first time I drove there, I didn't actually walk it. I got out and took the obligatory picture of the Bray Road sign, but the sun was going down, and I was in Elkhorn, and I'm looking at the map, and I'm trying to figure out where the hell this place is and how to get there. It's a little tricky to find the entrance to Bray Road. It's, I think, about 4.5 miles long.
Yes.
And then it ends at a T on the east side, and it comes off of, I forget what route, but it's one of the main routes that come out of Elkhorn. So you'll want to, it might be a little tricky to find it the first time, but I just kind of wanted to give people kind of a perspective. Now, so it must have been pretty interesting and exciting for you to have this local Wisconsin author talking about these weird sightings at some place so close to your home.
Oh, absolutely. I thought, every monster that had to be out in the
Yes,
Pacific area.
hopefully,
Yeah. No, it's exciting to know and actually they're all over. I mean, they're all over. People would just die if they knew how close they are to all of us.
Donna, how long had you known your neighbor before you became interested in Linda Godfrey's reports and discovered that your neighbor had a sighting too?
Well, she wasn't my neighbor, but I knew the area.
Oh.
It was up by Lima Marsh where where there were sightings of Bigfoot,
Okay.
but this was Bigfoot.
Oh, wow.
But Dogman has also been seen in Rock County here where I live. He's been seen all over southern Wisconsin, and I'm sure northern Wisconsin, there's no doubt they're up there too, but they're seen all over southern Wisconsin. And the first area I started in was Lima Marsh area. It's a big marshy area with woods and ponds and just a perfect place for creatures to live. And so that was we started looking in 2011. And then, when we were looking for Bigfoot, then we were also looking for the Dogman. And of course, we'd also go out to Bray Road. But it was so hard until I met Lee Hampel, to do any kind of investigation around Bray Road, because you can't stop there. You have to park your car somewhere and walk for a couple of miles, and which we did, but of course, we never saw anything. And until I saw Lee's video where he was being followed by one singular white orb type light, did I believe that he actually had something going on his property.
Wow.
Because that had happened to Jackie and I.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll get to that. But wasn't Lee on some show? I don't know what it was. Some paranormal show.
Yes.
I mean, I think maybe do you know which one that was? Do you remember?
Well, he's been on Expedition X, but he's also been on other programs. He's been on several.
Okay, good.
I don't remember the other ones.
Well, originally, Linda Godfrey wrote about him in the I've got it right here, Monsters Among Us, which one of her subsequent books, and he was under a pseudonym, and there they were talking about how, yeah, we'll get more and more into to Lee's stuff later, but we'll talk a little bit about him now. And later on, when we start talking about the photographs, you, Brandi, and I have seen these, so we will have to use Andy to try and make sure we're explaining what these amazing images look like. So Andy, if you don't know what the hell we're talking about, just speak up.
Not a clue.
But we will try to explain these images, and it's just one of these amazing hotspots. But let's Lee's journey is we'll talk a little bit about him. He started setting up these trap cameras, and he started chronicling these strange myths. I remember, oh, by the way, Brandi, you and I were at the Dogman Symposium several years ago. We didn't know each other then.
No.
But
I was there too.
you were there too.
Oh my gosh.
I'll bet you Andy was hiding in the back and he just hasn't said anything.
I think I was probably the one person who wasn't there, I'm afraid.
Okay. But I'll be darned. Okay. So, but that's where Linda was showing some of those images of the mists and so forth. And that must have been Lee's property.
Oh, that's right. Okay. I didn't remember that, but yeah.
But anyway, he was just in that one book, Monsters Among Us, is talking about putting out this roadkill and then it disappearing and there are pictures of carcasses of deer and so forth on his property, and you can see the timestamps on the photographs. And sometime later, there might be a mist, there might not be, but then the carcass is gone. A short time later, there's no footprints or drag marks. How the hell does that happen? So, but yes, so
no
that
picture on trail cam either.
Right. It's like the trail cams are managed somehow at certain points, but it only talked so much about his experiences. The one thing he did tell us, he said, now he's a scientist, he's a mathematician. He told Linda Godfrey when he discovered, when he was finding these weird images on his property, and he got a hold of her because she had been writing about this stuff. He told her, he said, if I had encountered one of your books 2 or 3 months earlier, I would have thrown it in the trash because, but now, anyway, there's some pretty good stories there, including his brother Fred. But let's go back a little bit. So was that really the thing that really spurred you to become more active and do investigations?
Oh yeah, Linda's books.
Yes, Linda's books.
Because you could just track down every sighting and go to every area, and basically we did most of them over since 2011. I think we have visited almost every sighting of a Dogman and most of the Bigfoot ones that are mentioned in her books.
Wow. My wife and I did that too one time. We were on a road trip and we took one of Linda's books because I'm proud to say we have our own Michigan Dogman that pops up now and then. And so we chronicled certain areas. She's not specific enough to where we could actually find out where it was seen. But this thing is, it's interesting. There's a podcast called Dogman Encounters Radio, and all kinds of people are coming out with their sightings, and many of them go back 20 years or whatever. And I wonder, it's almost like, as weird as it was to see a Bigfoot, people would be a little more comfortable with saying, I saw this ape-like creature in the woods, but seeing an upright canid is just maybe too weird, and people would just keep their mouths shut.
Yes, and more scary too.
Yes.
I think Bigfoot doesn't seem that shocking, but to know that there's an upright 6 or 7 foot tall dog with tall ears on 2 legs is frightening.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Linda Godfrey. For those who don't know about her, tell us a little bit about her early journey into this and how she discovered it.
Oh, I think she was working for a newspaper in Elkhorn and just drawing cartoons. And then they started getting reports of sightings of the upright Dogman on Bray Road. And that was in the late 80s. And I think she started writing about it in the early 90s.
Yes.
And it just took off because there was so many sightings and believable people that
Well,
said that they've seen something.
she went to the local sheriff's office, I think, and he actually had a file that
Yeah.
said werewolf on it
Yeah, the DNR guy
because
had a werewolf
people people would see these things. At first, they would think it was just some kind of a mangy dog, big dog on the side of the road, and then it would stand up on two legs.
Yes. Yeah. They would love to tell you that it's just an oversized wolf or something, but too many people have seen it stand up and
Well,
walk on two legs.
yes, and there's there are just too many, like you say, witnesses and patterns. She early in her book, I revisited her first book to prepare for my talk, and she talks about how many of the people that had the Dogman experience also had many other paranormal or psychic experiences. Would you say that's true about you?
Oh, gosh, yes. Absolutely. You can't believe the stuff that I've seen. I think once you look down that rabbit hole, if you spend enough time there, you are going to see things you can't even imagine.
Well, let me just, before we ask you to give some of your experiences, I remember early in The Beast of Bray Road, she talks about a woman, what was her name? It wasn't you, was it? Donna? Try to remember.
No,
I can't remember.
what was the story?
Well, she was talking to the animal control officer in Dresden,
Uh-huh.
and they were talking about the possibility of some cult related activity with the dog man. Then all of a sudden, a bunch of books flew out of the shelf, like a poltergeist phenomena thing.
Yes.
So there's many indications that suggest, like so many other cryptids,
I think that was Lily and Drizzy.
and okay, and that so many of them seem to come with other events. And John Keel, I've got to mention John Keel. He's one of those that early on saw that people that were having these experiences had all kinds of paranormal experiences. So tell us about some of your experiences, whether they're related to your Dogman investigations or not.
Well, with all of it going on, we've seen I have pictures of Bigfoot and one in a tree, seems to be a younger one, and then one in tall weeds. And but along with that, then if you spend enough time out there, we saw the night before Easter in 2012, we were sitting out by the we call it the Bigfoot Woods by Lima Marsh, and we were going to get out of the car for the first time in the dark because we had been afraid. It took us a while to go into the woods, even during the daytime. And then once we were in the woods, we thought, well, now we have to come back at night and see what we can find. And we're sitting in the truck waiting for the rain to stop. And as soon as the rain is stopping, we heard the geese getting stirred up by the pond. And then it sounded like one was being carried across the back of the woods. And then it sounded like something killed it. And then pretty soon we saw huge orbs that had to be 20 foot in diameter in the woods and floating through the woods. And then a whole tree lit up like it had a spotlight on it, but it was from the ground up. And then out of the corner of our eye, we see something flying in that we thought was maybe a helicopter because it was coming too close, but yet we couldn't hear any motors or any chopper blades or anything. And we had the windows down, and I said, that's a plane that's going to crash. And it didn't. It floated in next to the Bigfoot Woods, which is what we call it. And it hovered next to the woods, let's see, maybe about a half a football field away from Jackie and I sitting in the truck. And it was a huge UFO. It was just a big white circle of light. And we didn't have binoculars. I had a crummy little point and shoot camera. Cell phones were not what they are now. And we didn't want to get out of the truck because we didn't want the lights in the truck to come on because we were afraid that they would grab us and start probing us or something. That was our biggest fear. And so we sat in the truck with the lights out and stayed still. And we watched it for like 45 minutes, and it turned from a big white huge orb thing to a bell shape with different colored lights on it. And then it changed into like a cigarette type shape. And then it blinked out and it came back on. And after about 45 minutes, it floated back towards the marshes. And then it floated back towards some further marshes. And then we just lost sight of it, but it came back 5 more weeks in a row until we finally parked our behinds out by the woods in lawn chairs and waited for it. And because this time we were going to get pictures of it. And, because we were brave now. Let's go find this thing. And it didn't come close enough. It started out farther away. And so there was no getting pictures of it. They must know somehow that you're sitting there waiting for it, because every time you get your camera out, you might as well forget about it because you're not going to get a picture. But also in those woods, we saw, I have a picture of a gremlin type being running through the woods. I just had a feeling.
Just describe more what that looked like.
Well, it was black and white. It looked like it had an Indian headdress on. Its eyes were white. Its face was half white, half black. It was running. You could see its knee bent and its elbows bent as though it was running through the woods. It couldn't have been more than maybe 2 foot high, 3 foot. And I didn't see it at the time, but I took a picture because I just had a feeling that I needed to. And when I uploaded it to my laptop, I said, there is a creature in this picture. And so then I just zoomed in on it, and it's something, I don't know what it is, so I just call it a gremlin. I have no idea what it is.
Do you think Steve, could be a Pukwudgie?
Well, I've thought about that, and perhaps also what they call the Cherokee Little People. I don't know if the Cherokee were in that part of Wisconsin or not, but there's quite a belief in many Native American tribes of these little people. And some of the experiences sound very credible.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't see a face like they described with those beings, but it was just a black, I could see eyes and a mouth, and I think a nose, I can't remember, but it was just black and white. There was no flesh-colored face. There were no other features other than it had this big headdress on. And its whole body was black and white, and it couldn't have been more than 2 or 3 foot tall. But along with that, in those woods, we also had, we were trapped in the woods one day, and we couldn't figure out how to get out of there. And which was really weird because the road was only maybe 10 feet away, and we could see the cars going by. And yet, I think something had zapped us or something, and we couldn't find our way out. And then it started getting dark, and then it was like we were released, and we started walking out of the woods into the cornfield, and we heard one wolf howl with a laugh at the end of it. And we took off running like you can't believe. Oh my gosh. To hear that big, and to know that we were in that small wooded area with whatever creature made that howl and that laugh at us. And I told Jackie, I said, shine the flashlight behind me. And she goes, why? And I go, because if it's coming for us, I need to run faster. But I mean, I'm 15 years older than her, and she's 6 foot, and I'm 5'4". And of course, she's going to make it to the truck before I am, and I'm going to get it.
You're her insurance.
Yes, sir. And so, but nothing came after us. I think they were just having fun with us.
Oh my God.
I don't know what it was.
I think you did the right thing, because in the movies, the script dictates that they turn around and follow the noise. And then later on, the hero of the movie comes and checks their bodies, because you're like, Bruce Campbell early on in his pictures. He'd be in for the first few minutes and something would get him. He'd be in an elevator that snapped, or some mutant gorillas would get him in Africa. So you don't want to be Bruce Campbell in his earlier films.
No. You think you can be brave, but every once in a while. But because we had wandered those woods, we were in there for a couple of hours, 2 or 3 hours. and then we couldn't find our way out, and which was bizarre. And then all of a sudden we can find our way out, and they just howled at us and started laughing. And I don't know whether it was a dogman or a Bigfoot. I have no idea.
And about, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, because then later that year we saw Wereboy, which was like a shapeshifter. And then wait, stop.
Yeah.
Tell us more about the Wereboy first. Don't lose your thoughts. But
okay. So Jackie and I were going to the Bigfoot woods. We were in my truck and we were headed out.
And let me just stop you again. About how far is this roughly from Elkhorn or the Bray Road area?
Oh, it's about 20 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's kind of in the same neck of the woods. And is that someplace that somebody like me could venture onto someplace without violating private property rights?
Yes, that's a place you can go. Yes.
Because you're giving me encouragement, Donna, because I've always thought that I'm the guy that would show up with the paranormal crew that normally experiences things. And I would be the guy that would be the dampener that would just ground out all the paranormal activity. But you say you're the person that doesn't really experience it until you go there and you're in that hot spot yourself.
Oh, and something always happens every time we're out there.
Okay, so I interrupted you. So let's talk about the Wereboy and then what was to follow.
So in the same area as the Bigfoot have been seen, and then we have the wolf howl at us, and then we're going out to look in the Bigfoot woods again. It's on a sunny Sunday afternoon, about 1 o'clock, and we're going down to Highway 59 towards Lima Marsh, and between Milton and Whitewater, and we see, a young guy just with his head down, walking along the shoulder of the road, but from a distance, we could see that his hair was shockingly matted on his head, and it was matted about 4 or 5 inches high, and it was matted in a ball at his neck, a big ball of hair, and it looked like he just climbed out from under a pile of leaves where he'd been living for the last 10 years, but his clothes were clean, and they were modern, except for his shoes, which were like Keds, those slip-on things.
Yeah.
Nobody really wears anymore, but they were clean. His clothes were clean, and but his hair was dirty and matted. And when he looked up at us, we both screamed because he had a pronounced forehead. He had like dark circles under his eyes. But the most shocking part was his teeth were huge. They were at least 4 times the size of my own. They were completely flat and straight. You could see all of his uppers and all of his lowers because he had his mouth in this big grin. But his teeth were yellow and they were stained with green and brown. They were just horrid. And Jackie and I screamed. And so we decide we've got to come back around and get this guy on video. So
I'd be screaming too, just to let you know, but go ahead.
Yeah, because it was just when he looked up, first you see his hair as you're coming down the highway, and then he looks up and you see his face and his teeth, and then it's like, uh-oh, I thought Skinwalker was my first thought. And so we come back around, we make a U-turn and come back around, and I don't want to pull up alongside him because I was afraid he would turn into a wolf and get in the back of the truck and scare us to death. That was my thought. So we pulled into near the cemetery and made it, turned the truck around and got the cameras ready so that when he comes walking by us, which he would have to do as he continued on his way to Janesville or Milton, wherever he was going. And we got the video camera ready and the regular cameras ready. And we pulled up closer to the road to catch him as he went by. And then as soon as he was going by, we were going to pull up even closer. And all of a sudden, a white van going the opposite direction he was going, like we were, in a white unmarked van, completely brand new, no markings on it whatsoever. 2 guys in it in short sleeve shirts. They make a U-turn and pull up next to him. And Jackie says, they're going to pick him up. And I said, they're not going to pick him up. Who would pick him up? And they sure as heck did pick him up we couldn't see or video anything because there were two big trees in the cemetery that were in our way. And I don't know whether they threw him in the van or he got in on his own, but he got in the back seat, and then they made a U-turn and took off. So we were going to follow him going, I was doing 70 miles an hour trying to catch up to them, and we never saw them again in spite of looking down every side road and every driveway between Milton and Whitewater, and we never saw it again.
That's one of the most bizarre encounters I've ever heard. Is there
Totally bizarre.
any chance that this could be some kid in a horrific costume?
No, the teeth were no, and the hair. And you know what? After that, about 2 weeks after that, my husband and I were coming home down the road, right? It's a country road by our house. And just before we come into Milton, which has a population of about 6,000, just as we were about to enter town, there's a cornfield on the right. And up from the cornfield and the ditch looks like there's coming a deer. And so we slowed down because my husband thought, I don't want to hit the deer and have an accident. So we slowed down, and then we had to actually come to a complete stop because it was a wolf. It was a brown timber wolf. That's what it looked like. That walked right out in front of us and sauntered across the road, looking around like, I know you and you know me. And I think it was just letting me know I know where you live, because we don't have wolves this far south. I mean, there could be the occasional wolf, but it was what a coincidence that this wolf just walked right up in front of my husband's, our car, and stopped us cold on the highway.
Did you think the wolf could have been the person that you saw shapeshifted?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That was my first thought. I thought, if that thing looks at me, I'm going to die. And, just die of a heart attack. And it never looked me in the eyes. It just looked around and sauntered across the highway. Mm-hmm. Just like, I know where you live. Don't think I don't. That's the impression I got. I think that they all, if they know you're looking for them, I think they all just start to fool with you. It's like Skinwalker Ranch, where, a lot of those people that did the investigations think that some of those things went home with them.
Well, and there's also the trickster aspect that seems to follow investigators in this. There's something very disconcerting to me about, I can handle strange looking cryptids, even some of these one-off cryptids we hear about. But when they start sporting clothes and even, shoes, even though they might be out of style, there are some Bigfoot reports occasionally where they see them wearing kind of a ripped shirt or something like that. And that kind of thing just throws me for a loop. But I think people should realize that if you were spinning tales here, the last thing you would do is talk about this creature wearing clothes. Nobody does that. It's just making up something.
Right. And if his hair was so matted and dirty and his teeth were so green and brown and yellow, how did he have perfectly clean clothes on and brand new clean shoes on? The rubber on the white rubber on the shoes was spotless. I noticed that right away. Plus, he had a plaid shirt on.
Oh, the plaid shirt.
That's a sign of evil, definitely.
Well, my girlfriend, another friend that I know, her neighbor's son had a sighting of a werewolf, an actual werewolf on two legs, came right in that same area about 1 minute down the road, saw a werewolf run through her yard and out into the cornfield on Halloween night. And he went into the house. He was crying. He was so scared. And he was a teenager. But it was a full-on werewolf. It was, or a dogman. It was up on two legs, and it was about 6 foot tall. And it ran right past him. And he just stood there and watched it and was scared to death. So in the same area, and then the flying man-bat's been seen there too.
Oh. Okay, I'm going to ask you about that in just a minute, and I'm going to give Brandon, Andy. I haven't given them any time to ask any questions yet, but let me do a brief intermission. But before I do that, I've got to say, Donna, you realize that when you saw this this Wereboy or whatever it was, that you took temporary refuge at a cemetery.
Yeah.
That's
No.
what they do in movies, and then they're not counting on the zombies, you know.
Oh God, I didn't even think of that. Oh my God.
Okay, you are listening to the High Strangeness Factor, copyrighted on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Today, Andy, Brandi, and I are talking to Donna Fink about some of her lifetime experiences, and we will be talking more about her adventure in and around Bray Road. Brandi, Andy, just let loose for a while if you have some questions.
I got a
mine
couple for you.
Go for it. You go first then.
The two guys, the two guys that came with the van.
Yes.
What did you think of them? I'm thinking of, even though they were in a white van, you know, what were they wearing? Because I'm thinking, is this a Man in Black type, you know, trying to obscure what's happening here? Just what was your impression?
I got the impression that that's what they were, although they were wearing short sleeve plaid shirts.
Plaid again.
You know, just cotton though. I mean, Wereboy had on a flannel plaid shirt.
Okay.
But the two guys that picked him up had on short sleeve plaid cotton shirts, kind of like dress pants, and they didn't really stand out any in particular. You know, you would think that if he was escaped from a home or something, you know, they might have some designation on the van, or we would be able to follow them into Whitewater, which was the way they were headed, and catch up to them going 70 miles an hour. I pulled out right behind him, and he lost me.
Wow.
Did they have a license plate of any description on the back?
Yeah, they did, but I didn't get it because they were gone before I could even get to the end of the road.
It's easy for people to say all the time, how come nobody got a picture? How come you didn't notice this or that? But when you're in the middle of it, you know, you just aren't thinking about those things, I'm sure.
Yeah, because all we were thinking about was they're going to pick him up. No, they're not going to pick him up. And so, you know, then when they pulled over, we were just astounded. It's like they picked him up and threw him in there, made a U-turn, and took off. And we thought, well, we're going to catch up with them and find out if they're taking him to a home or if they're taking him, you know, to a mental facility or what's going on. But they completely disappeared so quickly that it had to be something other than just a human being. Had to be. So
one other question then. All the three people, the Wereboy and the two van people, they all, I'm getting the idea that you felt they were all physical entities.
They look like it, yeah.
Okay. And what about the gremlin that you saw? Did you think that was physical, or was it more transparent because it wasn't flesh colored, or what was your impression of that?
No, it was physical. I mean, you couldn't see through it. And yet it was some kind of paranormal entity. I don't know. I've read so many books and so many stories and listened to so many podcasts, and I've never really heard of anyone describing anything exactly like this was. I mean, I can send you the picture and you can post it. I mean, if
that'd be great.
Yeah. I'll do that. And you know, I've never seen anything like it or heard of anything like it, but except for those small Indians like you talk about. That's the only thing that compares to it at all. But it was definitely something solid.
Okay.
Well, at least in the picture it was. Now, when I was looking there, I didn't see anything at all.
Okay.
Go ahead, Andy.
You kind of covered one of my questions, was the idea perhaps it was some kind of psychiatric patient who had escaped and was then picked up again. But from what you're saying about, one, how they appeared, and two, how they seem to completely lose you so quickly and easily, suggests it probably wasn't something along those lines. It's just, I find it fascinating, this whole thing of so many different kinds of forms of strangeness being seen in the same sort of wooded area. It's, none of these things kind of fit any single simple category. I mean, you could argue that perhaps a dogman is just another form of a Bigfoot. It's just a large humanoid hairy creature. But from what you're saying, there's definite differences in terms of physical appearance and movement. So, I'm just struck again that you got the idea of this small goblin type creature. I'm currently doing some research in the book I'm working on at the moment, which is basically a collection of first-hand experiences from the Victorian age over here. I have a very large collection of folklore compilation books, published in the Victorian times, the 1800s. And while going through them for a different book I've had published a couple of years back, I came across lots of weird and strange descriptions of entities and things people have encountered. And some of the things you're talking about fit with some of the things I've read about, particularly the light. There's something that Stephen and I have talked about a few times, that the idea of the white light or yellowy white light is almost like the purest form of the weirdness, and then it becomes something else afterwards. How often, even the Victorian reports I've been reading, there was one I read just last night of basically a blacksmith who observed this strange light from the distance that gradually moved closer and closer to his workshop and then just shot straight up in the air. And within a few minutes, apparently a member of his family had died. And it was like, that's interesting, the timing there. But the description was basically of a white light that was moving across the moors towards him. It was up in Scotland. But it's that collection of almost very different kinds of descriptions of weirdness occurring in very similar places at the same kind of time. I find that fascinating. It's the whole that none of it kind of fits with any real classic description of anything in particular. And the other thing that struck me was there's a wood over here that's become very well known for a particular supposed UFO landing in the 1980s, and Rendlesham Forest. That people don't realise that Rendlesham has been the site of dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of strange sightings long before any UFO occurrence that happened in 1980. It goes back to the 1800s. Rendlesham has got a reputation of having lots of weird things happening in it, long before any UFO supposedly landed there. Now, there's a lot of debate and controversy around the Rendlesham Forest UFO landings, whether they actually happened or not, but there's no doubt there is high strangeness, shall we say, in that wood. And that's I've been there a few times, and it's got a vibe to it, especially as it gets dark. It does feel a little strange. So that, as I found, is an interesting parallel. These areas, the points of high strangeness, where lots of different strange things seem to happen in a relatively small area, and they're very different to each other, the things that occur. So I found that really quite fascinating.
Well, there's a portal.
Yes, but that's what's happening on Lee Hampel's property too. And we need to talk a little bit more about the possible why of it. But Donna, let's switch. I know you've got a lot more to say, which means we'll probably have to have you back sometime. But let's talk a little bit about how did you meet Lee Hampel?
I think that I got to know him the best when I asked him to be a speaker at the conference.
Oh, okay.
I had known of him, and I had followed him, and on Facebook, and any programs that he was on, I always watched everything and followed him. And then I think when I contacted him about being a speaker, I had no idea the amount of trail cam photos and evidence that he has. I had no idea.
Well, Brandi and I didn't either, and it was overwhelming, but go ahead.
Well, right, because when you see him on television programs, they never, ever show any of those pictures or any of the video he has or anything other than the footprints, and then they come to the conclusion that it's an oversized wolf, which is totally ridiculous. And so until I saw the pictures, I went to talk to him, and, he said he would show his pictures and everything. And I said, well, can we see him and will you share him with us? And he was happy to do so. And we sat there with our mouths open for 3 hours the first time.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, and we're going to try to paint these word pictures for Andy because it's pretty overwhelming. Now, of course, I gave the history a bit. I think he was there from about 2010, 2011 or something like that. He farms the property, and he started. They told him, they said, there's a werewolf on your property, and he's
Right.
thinking, yeah, okay, you're in the hooch again, right? So, but then he started seeing it, and he started to put up these cameras, and he started to get these incredible pictures, and like I said, he was just briefly before he would have told Linda that this stuff's crazy. But Andy, I got to tell you, one of the guys that spoke there, and by the way, I have to say this. The Bucks County Paranormal guys, Bucks County Paranormal Investigations, Eric
Yes.
Mintel and Dominic Sattel,
Yes.
their video is up now of their reveal. They tormented Brandi and I when they were on before because they wouldn't reveal their secrets until Halloween. Yes,
Yes.
it was like holding that carrot out and saying, "Oh, here, Steve, here's the carrot. Oh, nope, you can't have it." So,
Me too.
really good guys, and they're
Yeah.
going to be on again. But
Yeah,
now you were in their video. You're there because they interviewed you about the beast. What was that conversation like?
Well, they're a great group, totally awesome people,
And
and
they came from Pennsylvania, and they
Pennsylvania.
flew in. And let me just interrupt you for a second. While actually Brandi and I drove down the first time we met them, but we were innocently strolling by on Bray Road one day, and they were out there with their drone, which they were having some electrical problems with at first, but then
Okay.
and that's when they told us they were getting good stuff. And I guess they spent the night vigil out at Lee's property. Have you stayed overnight at Lee's property?
Yeah, we stayed there until about 2 a.m. because it just rained the entire night there, and it was cold, and nobody wanted to stand outside of the vehicle for hours on end. Although we did
Right.
get out a few times, but yeah, we had our own experiences while we were there. It was.
I
It's amazing.
think I would love to do that. I say that now in the
Yes.
safety of my room, talking to a computer. But I can be very brave when I'm on Skype. Let me tell you. Uh,
Yeah.
but so well, let's okay. Well, let's Brandi.
Yeah.
Let's ask you. When we went, what they did was Donna had it set up so that Lee did not want to just speak there. So we went to the farm, and in the barn he had it set up so we could see all these images, and we took a brief little hayride around the area.
Mhm.
But Brandi, tell us about your impressions when you started seeing these images.
I thought we were going to see, the same stuff that everybody shows on their TV show, where they think they might have something and it's a squirrel or something, So I wasn't quite sure what we were gonna see, but it, like Donna said, he had so many photos, and he didn't even show us all of them, but it was hours worth that he went through, and they were very well taken, with you could tell the size of things. You could, he knew exactly where it was taken. Some of the trail cams he baited, so he knew, that what was around that area. And they were, I don't think it's too much to say they were mind-blowing. There were things on there that you never thought you would actually see.
The good news is that now Lee has been keeping most of these pictures very close to his vest. But on the Bucks County Paranormal reveal, their investigation, there are you see several images of
Yes.
some of these strange things. Let's go around here. Donna, tell us about some of the images and your reactions to them. Then I want to go to Brandi about some of the specific images. But go ahead, Donna.
Well, what shocked me was that I always thought that these things avoided cameras because that's what you always hear. And how many pictures do we have? Hardly any. So I was shocked to see he must have how many thousand?
I don't know, but he didn't get many of what might be the creature, but he got these incredible UFO kind of pictures and some things that just don't make any sense. But I interrupted you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, he didn't show you all the pictures
No,
of
I know.
the Dogman that he has. And you can actually see it's standing up close to, now the camera is what, 5 or 6 foot off the ground. And so you can see the creature standing, you can only see half the creature, only half is in frame. And you can see it's black, and you can see the outline, you can see the tall ear, you can see that that split in the ear in one of the pictures where, like some dogs have, but all cats have. You can see that. You can see the fur on the arms. He's also got pictures of it farther out in the field, because he was out there during the daylight, and there it was in the field that butts up to Bray Road. And first it's on 2 legs, then it's on 4, then it's on 2, and then it just walks off into the woods. And the different UFOs he has pictures of, and the orbs and the lights, and I can't even remember what all he has. Just amazing array
and they've all got the timestamp. So sometimes when you see what must be some kind of a metallic craft, it whips around a tree, this thing that looks like a turtle shell, and in a very short period of time. And the Dogman pictures you were talking about, there's you get like part of a silhouette, but it's dark, where it was almost like, but these other ones where the bait is out there and the bait is taken, where you should have gotten clearer pictures of these things. It's like there's it's hard to wrap your head around. These things act like animals. They eat roadkill. They eat bait that has been left behind, or at least they take it. Yet there's some kind of an intelligence that prevents us from getting them clear photographs head on for the most part. The ones you talked about that you see it standing up in the field and getting it on all fours, were quite a distance. And he said he had it, you can't really see any detail, but he said he had it analyzed. And this one, I don't know who does all the analysis, but he said one of them said clearly that this, whatever it is 6 feet tall. Right. And let's Brandi, I want you to talk a little bit about some of the images and what some of the specific ones that stood out to you.
Sure. First of all, I want to add, we talked about last on one of the other episodes that these cameras were set to take photos based on heat and motion.
Yeah, good point.
So even if it was dark out and you didn't notice there was something walking by the camera, the heat signature should have shown that something was there removing the carcass that he had put out there. But the ones that stood out for me were the footprints, where there would be fresh snow, and all of a sudden in the middle of the field, the footprints start. There's no footprints leading up to them. They just start right out in the middle of the field. And then they are walking toward the wood line, as if the animal only had 2 feet. There are 2 tracks walking 2 foot, the tracks of 2 feet, I guess, walking toward the wood line. And then all of a sudden, the tracks split into 2 different animals going in opposite directions, and then just end in the snow. I cannot figure out how that happened if it's not something paranormal. I
right.
Can't see how something physical could make those tracks.
And the description of the tracks, the DNR people, was one lady that told him that he had to be a liar in faking these things. He's finding the tracks in the dirt and in the snow, and they're 5-toed. They have the pad and then the heel. And
right.
Remember what his brother Fred said originally when he said that he found these tracks that just started in the middle of nowhere? He said it must have parachuted in.
Right. Well, and then he had a couple photos of several black somethings, we couldn't really tell what, small, that seemed to be coming down out of the clouds. Like one minute they were there, the next minute, or they weren't there, and the next minute they were, and then they were lower, and
they were like pods.
Yes, it was almost like, because the way the pixels were when he tried to get a clearer image of them, it seemed like they were something solid surrounded by something that was either translucent or transparent, because it seemed like there was maybe a circular or amorphous type shape around a solid object that was falling out of the sky that you couldn't decipher what it was.
There was one image where, if you look at it, it looks like not a snake exactly, but like a black rope or something that goes up into
Yes.
two humps. It's suspended in the air, and he mentioned about how that looks pretty weird, right? And then he pans over to the right, and you see some kind of a boxy machine-like thing. I don't know if it's on the ground or in the air. It looks like it might have a couple wheels or discs on it. And also, what about the night? You get these weird light anomalies. It's like a beam that comes down, but then diffracts in the middle of nowhere with nothing to diffract it.
Right.
And then, it's just.
And that
I mean,
reminded me of the Skinwalker, the experiments that they were doing at the Skinwalker, where the lights were, the lights would flash out of nowhere. They'd see a light and flashing, and there was nowhere that it was coming from. They couldn't decide where it was coming from. That's kind of what that
Yeah, that made, I thought that as
refraction
well.
reminded.
Same as you, yeah.
Yeah.
Similar kind of thing,
And
definitely.
did you see the UFO that was shaped like Jeff Bezos' rocket ship?
Oh, I don't know if I remember.
I
that
don't
one.
recall seeing that one. No.
Maybe he didn't show it to you, because I think during the later show, I told him, I said, come on, Lee, we got to see that one. And because it's shaped, you know what Jeff Bezos'
Right.
rocket ship is shaped like.
Yes.
And this one was shaped the exact same way.
Huh.
It's just fascinating, the different UFOs that you see in his pictures. They're all different.
But what floors me is these carcasses disappearing. Some of them have been there for a while and are decaying, and then all of a sudden, you can see the timestamp. I can't remember exactly how long the space was, but they're gone, and there was nothing that would trigger the camera. The cameras weren't triggered, and you look, and there's no footprints, and there's no drag marks. Also, he was getting these photographs of this mist. There's a photograph of Lee where the camera triggered a photograph of him, and one of those mists is kind of surrounding him, but he didn't see it visually. Now that would, after reading several missing 411 books, I think I'd stay the hell away from those mists.
Yes.
Yeah.
He had no idea that the mist was, and it actually, because he remained in front of the trail cam with what he was looking at, and I'm not sure if this is when the camera was set at 8-second intervals or 30-second intervals, but in any case, the mist just got thicker and thicker around him to where he was basically obscured by the mist, but he
couldn't see
said
it.
he had no idea there was any mist there. He didn't see any.
That's really strange.
It was bizarre.
And it almost looks like there's something materializing and dematerializing, some being in some of his pictures. Where
Right.
The black cloud forms.
Yes.
Almost looks like something's appearing, and then sometimes it looks like it's disappearing.
So what have you experienced? I know that you had bad weather, but you still did experience some things, did you not? Or maybe not that time, but another time?
Yeah, when we were out there, Jackie and I had gotten out of the vehicle, and I triggered one of Lee's trail cams, and it looks to me in one of the pictures like there's a hand around my arm with like a lightsaber coming out of it. I did, and then in the next picture, you can see that there's nothing behind me, and it's not the hood on my coat, or you can see that there's, Jackie's 6 foot tall. So if she was behind me, you could have seen her. And in the very next picture, there's nothing there. And then at one point, of course, my FLIR didn't work.
Mhm.
first thing. And then the next thing is Lee's night vision wouldn't work either.
Hmm.
But his trail cam did. And so he got that picture of me, and I'm not sure what that was, but it looks to me like there's a hand around my shoulder. With a lightsaber coming out of it is the only way I can describe it. And then when we were sitting in the vehicle, it was about 2 a.m, and we were up by the barn and just waiting for something to happen or to see anything. And my girlfriend Diane saw something about 7 foot tall and dark, just a dark shadow being, walk behind the vehicle and move off towards the barn, and it was gone.
Oh
And
my gosh.
yeah. Well, and then the guys from Bucks County got the howls on
Yes.
video, and then they had eye shine. I saw that eye shine, and I thought, "Oh my God!"
Yeah, that was
How
pretty noticeable. Mhm.
how high off the ground was the eye shine, do you think?
Well, it was tall. It
Okay.
was tall, and you didn't see it. Oh my gosh! Um, I saw it right away, and I thought these guys don't even know that eye shine is over there, and then they spotted it.
Right.
I thought it was about 7 foot tall, wasn't it?
I wasn't even sure if it was up in a tree or if the ground sloped up where it was where they saw it, if there was a small like ditch and then the ground sloped up. It was dark, so not knowing that area, it's hard to
Well, I
say.
know that area, and I've been off in there, and there's no ditches there,
Okay.
not in that area. And so I tend to think it was something tall. I don't
Wow.
know what, but you can't tell, but you can certainly see the eye shine. And
Yes.
remember the one picture that he had with the beast sitting on its haunches and with those great big glowing white eyes?
Yes.
You saw that one.
Right.
Well, the eyes reminded me of that picture, the glowing eyes in the Bucks County video.
Mhm.
I thought that was really interesting, and they got some really good howls a couple of times.
So we're definitely not talking about a marsupial on stilts.
No, no.
But sorry, that's a bad pun. That's my worst pun tonight. But I had their next investigation was in the Pine Barrens, and Eric sent me a couple howls they got from that. But he also messaged me. He said that some of the stuff that they have encountered there seemed to parallel some of the stuff they found at Bray Road. So that's going to be another great reveal
Definitely.
coming up. But okay,
Let me
let's
ask
just
Donna a quick
yeah.
question.
Oh, please go ahead.
When you had the picture of the hand, potentially or arm or what have you on your arm, do you remember whether or not you thought you felt somebody touching you when
No,
that happened?
no, not at all. I
Okay.
had no idea that any of that was going on, and I can send you that picture too. I mean, it's open for interpretation, but there's something white wrapped around my arm, and looks to be like there's a few fingers there, and then there's a light coming out of that hand was what it
Wow.
looks like to me.
Wow.
I don't know. That's the interpretation I get.
Okay.
I'll send you that picture, and you can post it if you want.
There's an interesting encounter that Linda talks about in the Monsters Among Us. And somebody named Mike Moran was driving through Pennsylvania on Route 81, 1994. And he sees this orb or this light. Well, at first he thinks it's a light on perhaps an ATV driving kind of recklessly through the woods at night. He's thinking this guy must be crazy. That's got to be dangerous. And he sees how this is going to intercept the road that he's on. And when this would get to the edge of the road, there's kind of a cliff that goes down, so it could be very dangerous. But as he watches, the light morphs into a 6-foot Dogman, and he drew a picture of it for Linda. But he was just flabbergasted, and you wonder, is that what's happening on Bray Road? If we could actually be there to see it, if a camera could catch it, is one of these orbs moving along in the snow, and then this thing passes through a portal or manifests, and all of a sudden we get the footprints?
That's the impression I get.
It would make sense. in a very strange world, but that would make sense, wouldn't it? As though it is some kind of gap opening up and there's something's passing through the gap, as it were, and then sort of physically in our realm. But again, we're back to those light things. Really, that's the thing I always find most fascinating. Is things so often start with a light anomaly and then becoming something else. Excellent.
And you saw the video of the orb moving around his truck, right? And passing between the truck and
I'd like to see
his friend.
I don't think I
No,
saw that one. No.
we didn't see that.
Oh, Lee has a video of an orb moving around his pickup truck as he's sitting in it. But he said before that orbs have actually entered the vehicle and just
Oh my
put it
God.
across by the dashboard and then just gone out.
So here we have these some kind of an animal that acts like an animal. I mean, it again, it eats roadkill. It howls. Yet it seems to be able to more than just avoid a camera. It's right there in front of the camera, apparently, but the camera isn't triggering when it's there most of the time. But then you also get something that hints at some kind of technology. These strange looking craft, very solid looking metallic pieces of some kind of hardware. What the hell is going on? Is this I wonder if it's not, if this is actually some kind of a portal where the so-called the air is thin. Is it all one thing coming from one source, or is it sort of a grand central station where all these different things are happening and perhaps they're not even necessarily connected with each other? But then how is it that what we think of as dumb brutes, and perhaps they're not dumb brutes at all, how is it that they avoid the cameras?
Yeah, it's like we've talked about this sort of thing before, haven't we, Steve? The idea that it's somehow more comfortable to think of them purely as cryptid animals that are in this world. We just haven't caught or spotted them anymore. The idea that there's something more to them than that there is an intelligence of a very different kind to ours. So it doesn't seem to make sense to us that a intelligent creature would just pick up and eat roadkill, but yet be able to must appear beside it to pick it up and then disappear with it. It's like the juxtaposition of those two ideas, something that kind of very base and sort of bestial, the idea of eating roadkill, but then this seeming high technology at the same time. It doesn't make logical sense to us, but then that's because that's how we think. And these, whatever they are, may have a completely different system of logic that to them makes perfect sense. So that's why I find the most fascinating, the whole notion of the total strangeness of it all.
I've given the analogy many times of we have a 1,000-piece puzzle that if we could put it all together, we'd say, "Oh, that's what's happening."
Yes.
But we've only got a dozen pieces of that puzzle, and they're spread throughout. None of them are right next to each other. So we've got these little fragments of what the. I mean, there's got to be some kind of objective reality to this. There's got to be some kind of principles involved, but I'm just at a loss to understand it.
I mean, that comes back to what we have said before. It is, perhaps that's the whole point. This isn't objective reality in the same sense that all four of us now are experiencing as a physical world around us. Perhaps this is the next level above that, if you like, that it's not fully physical in the physical world, but it manifests in such a way as it leaves impressions, as we said before, what John Keel said about that kind of thing, that these things become so real in a sense they create a physical impression that they don't actually exist. They're kind of winking out of existence, if you like. That kind of, it's just a little bit above our more base level of reality, if you like. They're less physically real than us, but still interact with the physical world around them. I find that idea kind of works for me.
Donna, do you know if this is if there are actual ancient mounds right in this general area of Bray Road?
I'm not sure, but they're all over in our area, so I would bet. And so many of them have been plowed up and just built over. And Lee even said that the neighbor across the road from him years ago. A couple of the neighbors saw a huge UFO land in that cornfield across the road from Lee's property. So this has been going on for a long time. This was when some older person was like 10 years old, so probably 60 years ago or so. I can't really remember, but a huge UFO landed there. And all the neighbors in his area have seen something. They just won't talk about it at all.
Right. I know. They really clam up, don't they?
Yes, yeah, and they've even heard and seen a hyena type being running
Oh,
around.
that's right. Lee said that there was more than one type of cryptid that he
Mhm.
has seen on that property.
Right. And I wouldn't doubt if there's Bigfoot there too. One of the pictures of a creature standing close up to the camera looked to Jackie and I and Diane like a Bigfoot. Lee thinks it's a dog man, but I just see a round head. I don't see the ear. I could be looking at it different than he does, but it almost looks like there's a Bigfoot standing up by the camera too.
Well, in Linda Godfrey's second book, Hunting the American Werewolf, she talks about how through happenstance she was looking at a cluster map of dogman sightings in an area of southern Wisconsin, and she was also looking at a map of it was called Indian Mounds. I forget the name of the author, but
Right, right.
the clusters lined up almost perfectly to and these effigy mounds, but they were certain types of effigy mounds. They were the panther mounds and the water spirit mounds almost exclusively. And I thought, that seemed to be a little bit more than a coincidence.
Oh,
Mm.
I agree. I think so too.
And that would also, well, I don't know. I wonder why I even try to figure these things out. It just gives me a headache. But it's just fascinating that all these things. And then I'm sorry to rip on the flesh and blood believers, but some of these people that believe that Dogman is merely an unknown creature, uh, if they could just spend an hour or two with Lee Hampel, it would completely destroy their paradigm.
Oh, people would just freak out if they saw what he has. That's why it was so good to have him, do the presentation after the conference. And I hope he's going to do one next year because I see that he has more footage now of other strange things. So he's gathering stuff as we speak.
Well, Donna, if you ever need another, I'm just putting this out there. If you ever need another researcher, now I had two reasons people should take me along, but one you've destroyed because I was going to say that I could be the control group of one, the guy that nothing ever happens to see if something happens. But you have fulfilled that already, so you blasted that. But like you said, you moved a little slower than your friend. Well, I'm not moving that fast these days, so I could be the guy that during danger you could be like 6 or 7 furlongs ahead of me by the time I even knew something was wrong.
So I just have to beat you. Is that it?
that
Right.
that's it, and it shouldn't be that hard. I'm a little bit clumsy these days, so yeah, so I'm just putting that out there for for safety's sake.
Oh,
But
yeah. No, I'd love to have you come out anytime.
well, there's a motel not too far away that I could stay at, and I don't want to speak for Brandy, but I know Brandy is dying to go to one of these places sometimes, right, Brandy? Oh, well,
You are
she
right.
moves. She
Yes.
she moves pretty fast though, so she wouldn't be that much help. But in all seriousness, I would love to spend a night vigil in some of these places
Uh,
and to see what would happen.
we could spend the night at Lee's if he'd let us.
Well, I would love to. Although, let me tell you something else he said. They spent a night vigil out there. It was Lee, I think he said his godson. I think Fred was there and another relative, and they had a fire. And you know how gentlemen will have to wander off and when
Yes.
nature taps them on the shoulder, right? Well, they would do that. But he said as the night went on, and they would hear howls and some strange things are going on. That circle got a lot smaller. So,
I can
and
only
uh,
imagine.
and on a serious note, he said very seriously, he said, "This is a different place at night."
Oh, yeah.
And and you've been there yourself to see it.
Oh, yeah. But he even has seen it in the daylight. I mean, and
Yes.
and then the hyena one time started towards them as they were standing there watching it. So they got on the ATVs and got the heck out of there, he said. Can you
Yeah.
imagine?
That's something that I don't think we brought up just in talking about Bigfoot and the dog man is that for people that aren't familiar with the dog man like they are with Bigfoot, is that a lot of or most of the reports of the dog man have some kind of like menacing
Yes.
overtones, like where with Bigfoot more benign a lot of times, the reports, but the Dogmen almost always seem to have some kind of like, just, I don't want to say evil intent, but just more like a menacing overtone to them. Do you think that's the
Oh, I
case?
agree. I agree. I think the Dogman is a lot scarier. And when we saw the Wereboy, it seemed sinister.
Okay.
Although he seemed like he was pulling a prank on us, and my thoughts were, I know you and you know me, and he was out to scare us. But I don't think he anticipated that we would make a U-turn and come back around to try and get video of him.
That's right. That only happens in the movies.
Yeah, right.
They've got to follow the script. I mean, they can't do anything else. Let's see. I guess we should probably start to wind things down. We've been almost an hour and a half. But before we go, if anybody, Donna, if you'd like to talk about any more experiences, and Brandi and Andy, if you have any other questions or thoughts, please go ahead.
I have a brief observation.
Yes.
I think it's very unfair you guys discussing going out together on the vigil, and I'm over here 5,000 miles away. I can't join you.
But the most fascinating sighting was in Rendlesham Forest. I've listened to Jim Peniston at a Rockford MUFON meeting a couple of times and interviewed him one-on-one. And his story, his newest book, Rendlesham Enigma, timeline of what happened, comes to the conclusion, finally, that it's us from the future that are visiting the Earth and trying to find a way to save humanity. That's what he discovered when he touched the UFO.
It's an interesting possibility.
Very interesting.
There are so many different theories and arguments and ideas around what happened in the forest that night. And I think the only thing that could be agreed upon almost universally is something happened in that forest that night. But what it was, it's a total mystery. That was just one event of a whole series of strange occurrences. And there are, we're talking about burial grounds, tumuli, as we call them over here. There are quite a number of those in and quite close to Rendlesham itself. And in fact, there was a report back in the 1960s of a farmer who basically had been farming his own land, which included the tumuli, which had gradually been worn down over the years because of continued farming, found within it a human skull that was elongated. Now, how that got there and what it was doing there is an absolute mystery. Apparently, he contacted the local police, who probably came and collected it for analysis, and that was the last anyone ever saw of it. But this is the 1960s. So you're 20 years before any UFO supposedly landed in the woods there. I mean, there's a chap I know, I've got to know a little bit, I've spoken to him occasionally, who has catalogued all the strange sightings that have occurred in the woods. I mean, we're talking very bizarre things like creatures walking that are two-dimensional. Literally, they're flat as they walk across the road, he said. And in the middle of the road, it turned 90 degrees and was like a line, just a flat line, and then turned again and was then flat but side on, so you could see it. So more than one person saw this thing literally walking across the road. And it was two-dimensional. That's just bizarre. So, it is a very strange place, certainly.
Wow. And that same decade of the 60s is when the great Hammer film, Quatermass in the Pit, came out, in which they find, with many other things going on, they find those elongated skulls buried deep under the subway, if you remember that.
Three-legged grasshoppers. That's one of my favorite films.
And yes, it is. It's superb. It's a kind of it almost foreshadows some of the stuff that we look at, but Brandi has done research into the elongated skull thing. And Brandi, isn't it true that some of these, obviously, some of these were manipulated by people when they were children as they're growing up? But isn't it true that some of them don't bear those earmarks or whatever you want to call them?
Correct. Yes,
They're not anomalous.
Right, they are anomalous, and even some of the ones that they've found in Peru have ties with European ancestry. So maybe that's something that's somehow connected to this Rendlesham find
Yeah,
or something.
that is
That's
particularly
very
interesting. Yes,
interesting.
to say, because that's the thing, of course, these things are known about mainly in sort of South America. What if when we're doing over in Suffolk countryside in the 1960s?
Right.
It's an absolute mystery. But as I said, it was the fact that this guy, I actually was friends with the cousin of the guy whose farmland it was. This is many years ago now, I must admit. But so it was kind of semi first-hand story. It wasn't like someone sort of vague stranger had told me. It was someone who kind of knew the guy. And as I said, like, it was a tomb line, an ancient burial ground that had been basically worn down over the centuries by farming. And as I said, it was literally, there's been very heavy rain. He said the ground, they turned it over and pulled up a couple of odd artifacts, but this skull suddenly emerged. Now, whether it was just maybe a birth defect and they were frightened by it and buried it in the ground, I don't know. No idea. But as I say, the fact it was shown to the police, and that was the last ever seen of it, because obviously you have to inform the police in case it's a more recent death, and perhaps there's been a murder or something. But that was the last you ever heard of it. It just was taken away and never seen again.
Donna, is there anything else that we should know about before we close for the night?
No, other than stay tuned for next year, because I'm always looking for anyone who has a Dogman or a Bigfoot sighting or any kind of sighting. And I hope to bring them along to the next conference. And I'd love to have you come out anytime and let's go. I have a couple of places that there have been very recent sightings near Bray Road, and I'm always looking for eyewitnesses. So if anybody have seen anything, please get a hold of me. And I can't wait till the next conference. And I welcome you guys out here, and I'd love to see you. And let's go on an investigation.
I would love to do it, and also I appreciate you asking me back for the next conference. So
yes, please
make sure you stay alive and well and healthy, or I won't be able to talk to anybody. But and hopefully Brandi will come up and help me at my table again.
I would love to.
Yes, please.
And tell us, you've got some Facebook pages and so forth, ways people can contact you.
Yep, Facebook page Beast of Bray Road, and then I also have Southern Wisconsin's Wild Ones, Ohio, Michigan, and Illinois. Or just contact me, Donna Fink. And I have the YouTube channel where I interview eyewitnesses about any kind of paranormal sighting. So join me there.
And Brandi, any other closing remarks?
No, I'm just fascinated. It was very interesting. I know Donna has a lot more stories to tell. So
we'll have to have you back sometime.
Well, thank you.
And especially after we don't know about the Pine Barrens investigation with Eric and Dominic. So when they stop tormenting me and completely spill the whole, anyway, seriously, people, you should watch this video that they've done. It's on their YouTube channel, Bucks County Paranormal Investigations, and you'll see Donna there being interviewed. You'll see you'll see three of the Bucks County's people out there on Lee Hampel's property, and they had some interesting experiences with the drone and so forth. Definitely worth watching. But I wanted to quote from the Mothman Prophecies, John Keel, as we close up, where Keel says, this is toward the end of the Mothman Prophecies. Mm-hmm. He talks about gradually all these men are being drawn closer and closer to ontology, which is a branch of metaphysics that deals with the nature of being. And he says, to an examination of the question that lies beyond the simplistic, can these things be? The real question is, why are there these things? Which we have tried to wrestle with a little bit tonight and don't really know. Of course, Keel didn't know either. So that gives me some comfort. But Donna, thank you so much for being on tonight.
Oh, thank you.
And I knew this was going to be a great episode. And Andy and Brandi, I'm really glad that Andy was having some audio difficulties, which is, and Andy knows whenever I have a technical difficulty, I cry like a little girl. And I go, Andy, you got to help me here. I don't know what's going on. So, but Andy can figure these things out. So he dries my tears and says, don't worry, Steve, we can fix it, which is always good.
We can do it.
And And Brandi, hopefully, maybe someday we can journey up that way and spend a night vigil in one of Donna's secret high strangeness areas.
Yes,
I would love it.
yes.
Well, in all seriousness, let's plan that sometime. So I'm going to close out the show. Everybody sit tight. I'd like to talk to everybody afterwards a little bit. The High Strangeness Factor was created by Steve Ward and Andy Mercer and is copyrighted on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I want to thank our fearless leaders here at the network, Irene Ellen Block and Mark Johnson. I also want to thank Andy Mercer, who does double duty as regular co-host and producer, and also Brian Zeller, who composed the original music for the show. I can also be heard weekly on Mac Maloney's Military X-Files as a correspondent on this same network and other platforms. And I am Steve Ward, your humble host here on the High Strangeness Factor, a displaced Yank here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Thank you for listening. I will see you all again in a fortnight. Take care.